We are so glad you are here for this week's episode. Listen, we are already getting into the complicated stuff, ladies. Carrie and Alicia are here with me this morning. How are you, friends?
Hey, hey.
Excellent.
Yep,
Thanks for
doing
asking.
well.
Yeah, listen, we have already talked about politics, religion. Those are two heavy subjects. I don't know if you've gotten any feedback yet, but it's heavy. Those are heavy ones. Today's episode, equally as heavy. Hate to break it to you. We're going to keep it going. Listen, I feel like these topics are so key. And if we all could just go into it with open hearts, open minds, and be willing to take one piece, one nugget, and apply it into our relationship with our in-laws and our daughter-in-laws and our mothers-in-law, we are going to benefit. So let's start with parenting. Carrie, how did you grow up? What was the parenting style like in your home with your parents? How did they parent you?
Well, we have different dynamics. So my parents divorced when I was 4, and I did the back and forth thing every other weekend. And so with my dad, it was, let's take you to Chuck E. Cheese and let's just have fun, because I was only there for a few days. And then, but back at home with my mom remarried. And so that was my normal. So I was the youngest of 4, and it was super stressful in the home. My sisters were just fighting. And so when I was growing up, it was kind of like, just go over there, just do your thing. Like, we don't have time for you. It's just, because there was so much. And then I felt like I couldn't bring anything to the table as well, because there was always so much going on. And we didn't talk about things. We just did not talk about things. And so that leaves us, like we've said before, as a kid, to make up my own story in my mind about what my role was and what my responsibility was in that. So we didn't talk, and it was stressful. And we all went off in our own ways and coped in our own ways. We didn't come together as a family.
Do you feel that made you a stuffer at all? Would you say you stuff things because of that?
Absolutely. Yes. For sure. Yep. Still do.
It's amazing, isn't it? What about you, Alicia? What was the parenting style like in your home?
So similar to Carrie, my parents split when I was 8, almost 9. And my mom moved me in with my grandma and grandpa. So from like 8, 9 on up, I lived with them. And then I would visit my dad a couple years after he moved down to the Keys, and I would see him Christmas, summer, and Easter. So I did have longer time with my dad. But as far as living at my mom's with my grandparents at their house, it felt very, very strict. I was an only child, so it was very possible to have all the attention on me all the time. There was always like, what are you doing this? I felt very, I don't know
Almost
how to describe it. But
micromanaged?
yes. I felt very micromanaged. And you guys know how I love to be micromanaged, right?
I mean, you love management of all types.
I love to be managed. I love it. Come at me and try to manage me. See what happens. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. I want to be friends. No. Yeah. So I felt and as I got older, a lot of my boundaries that my mom had for me felt very, very strict and restrictive, because a lot of my friends, most of my friends, had wider lanes that they could drive in. So that was kind of my mom's side. My dad's side, he was very much about kind of manipulating me, but also the boundaries were not the same. Like the boundaries were wide, but the manipulation was heavy. So it was like, hey, do you want to drink alcohol? Come on, let's drink together. But at the same time, no, you can't have the keys because I'm going to only drive you everywhere you can go, type of thing. So it was very different. Also didn't talk about, like on my mom's side, we didn't talk about things. It got very uncomfortable if there was something to talk about. Like I remember, and maybe this is in my memory, but I don't think it is. But like when there were tampon commercials that would come on, I would have to leave the room. It would be like, hey, you need to go brush your teeth right now.
Wow. Yeah.
Like it's time for you to go brush your teeth. Go get ready for bed. There were just certain things that were kind of taboo.
Right. Yeah, mine was similar. So. Well, I say similar. My mom very much wanted me to be her friend. So she raised me very permissive, but also because she needed me as an ally against my dad, with their relationship. So I quickly learned that I was almost treated not like an equal, but I was definitely not treated as a child with her for the most part. I mean, she was not consistent. She was very inconsistent in her parenting. But because she and my dad had so many problems, she put me in the role of friend, which, again, we all know needs lots of therapy to get out of that. Whereas my dad was very authoritarian, and because my mom she was scared of my dad. Again, we go back to what we talked about a couple weeks ago in secrets. There were so many secrets I know in my family now that my dad probably held over my mom. So my mom was fearful of my dad. So then I became fearful of my dad. And my dad was this almost untouchable man in our city. He was kind of like a bad guy. He was, would go gambling at night, and people were scared of him in the town. He slept with a gun next to his bed. I mean, it was crazy, right? Looking back at it now, I'm like, what in the world was he involved in? He was a real estate broker and kind of a badass, but in a scary way as the daughter. But yet I loved him, right? I loved him. He would come home and I would just, let me get you a drink. He drank alcohol till he became a Christian my junior year. So I'd go make him a scotch on the rocks every day, rub his feet. I mean, it was warped. It was just such a weird relationship with my parents. And my mom was a yeller. My mom yelled. And so that has always been a sensitive thing to me, is the yelling. Now, I have yelled at my kids, don't get me wrong, but it's not my go-to normally. I have lost my jump. My kids will all tell you. So let's move on. Let's move on to, we take the way we were parented and then we become parents real young. You girls become a parent real young. I was in my 20s. Again, I adopted John Michael. He was 9 months old. So my parenting journey started a little differently. How did you take the way you were parented and how did that influence your own parenting style? And how would you describe your own parenting style? Carrie, you go.
I'm thankful that my faith journey started when I became a parent, because who knows what that would have looked like. So because I was a stuffer and didn't have a place to experience emotions, like we just didn't deal with emotions. And so, when my kids, especially after I became a single mom of 5, it was like, oh, you got emotions? I'm uncomfortable with that. Let's just do the thing. Let's just stay busy or play or do the dishes or clean. Like, it was very uncomfortable for me to just sit across the table and have a conversation, which saddens me now because I have some kids that are more emotional and I would have loved to have that space, but I didn't learn that. I didn't know how to do that. It was uncomfortable for me. And thankfully I grew as my faith grew. I grew and I was able to do that a little bit better as I got older. So just not allowing them to have the emotions that they needed to feel because I didn't know. I was uncomfortable with it. So.
Yeah. What about you, Alicia?
So I think I kind of try, they say you either mimic what your parents did or you turn completely the other opposite direction, right? Yeah. I think I kind of did a little bit of both. I took all the bad stuff and that just naturally poured out of me. So, I was a yeller at my kids and I was an only child. So having 3 rowdy boys was a difficult assignment, I feel like, for me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what it was like to have siblings. Jeff would tell me stories of him and his siblings. I'm like, your mom let you guys do that stuff? Open mouth, insert foot, right? Like, she didn't let them do that stuff. They were just doing it. So I definitely was yelling. I was more of that, authoritarian, authoritative, whatever the bad one is. That one where you don't really, authoritarian. And then I also tried to lighten up on some of the strictness. So I was like, I'm not going to be so strict with my kids. Now, turns out, they felt that things were pretty strict compared to their friends and what their friends were getting to do. And I'm like, well, that's ridiculous because your friends have way too many liberties. So I'm sorry you think that, but it kind of ended up being a very similar experience for them. I think that they kind of felt like they were, and I was, and trying to control things, just always, like can't get out of control. And they were always out of control, and really just trying to kind of lock that down was difficult for sure.
Yeah. For me, my degree's in child development. So I was real fortunate that I studied that in college, because I do feel as if it gave me a foundation that helped me so much become an instant parent of a 9-month-old. Doesn't mean I got it all right, but I was fortunate to have learned so much in my psychology classes and recognized my parents, the way that they were unhealthy in their parenting. And because of my love for Mr. Rogers, as you know, and learning, even watching him as a young child, the value of talking it out, because my family didn't talk it out. My mom did talk to me about things. It was weird. She would talk about, my period and things like that, but she never would talk about emotional stuff. And she would never, to the day she died, I never heard the woman apologize once. So I apologize quickly. That's just, again, you said, Alicia, go to the opposite. And I definitely recognized how much that hurt me to not have her ever say she was sorry. And so I try to apologize quickly. I also learned that from Mr. Rogers. I really owe everything to Mr. Rogers. Let's just be honest. I owe everything to Mr. Rogers and Jesus. But Mr. Rogers and having a child development degree, my kids, we talk it to death. We're the opposite, Carrie. We talk about everything and they are like, Mom, I don't want to talk about it right now. We're going to talk about it. So my kids, for the most part, have learned to talk everything out. I definitely got overwhelmed, Alicia, like you. I definitely had moments. I had so many children and I always had friends over. Not only did I have my children, it was not unusual for me to have 4 to 5 additional children at my house all the time. And I definitely got overwhelmed. When I found myself overwhelmed, I reverted to what I knew from my own childhood of my mom yelling. And I would definitely be guilty of that. If I had to label myself in today modern terms, I would label myself a gentle parenter with my goal of really conscious parenting is what I fall into, which is not necessarily how my grandchildren are raised. And so for me, it's tough navigating that sometimes, the differences between my parenting style and my daughter-in-law's parenting style. I only have one of my, even though I have 6 grandchildren, they're all from one son and his wife, if you didn't know that about me. So they have 6 children, 8 and under. So she too probably feels the overwhelm that we have felt. And that leads to some parenting differences for me. And so I try to figure out, how do I best navigate that? How do we navigate when our parenting style does not match up to the way our grandchildren are raised? Do y'all have that? Do you have differences in parenting styles from the way your grandchildren are raised? Alicia?
So it's interesting because my oldest son's wife, Essa, and they have a little girl, my granddaughter Elise, and Elise is very strong-willed. I imagine this is probably what I looked like when I was younger with my mom. And she is, she's a little spitfire. But initially, Essa was definitely a yeller. And so I kind of I understood that, right? But then when I would see it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I did. That's not a great way to do it. Right. But she recognized that in herself. And she would so we would talk about it. She's like, yeah, I don't like yelling. I just get so frustrated. And my mom was a yeller. And so now I'm a yeller. And even hearing her mom say, well, okay, so you're the one that has to break the cycle. You can break the cycle. And she's worked really hard to, use all these tools that she's gathered through podcasts and reading different things, listening to different things. About how not to yell, but also to be an effective parent. I think that's the hard part, right? You kind of train your kids to only listen to you when you yell, because when you yell, that's when consequences are imminent. You're like, Mom's we're definitely getting a consequence now, right? If you shift those consequences up sooner before you get to that point, they'll learn that consequences are coming without you getting all upset.
Yeah, they know exactly if you're I count to 3. They know they've got till 3. They learn quickly. We train them to respond versus, again, coming from the conscious parenting side, if we start off giving them choices and letting them have some control, because guess what? For children, it's often about control too. Mm-hmm. And here we have these little humans who finally, that's why toddlers are my favorite. They finally get some control. And they're like, no, you are not taking that control away from me. And so if you can learn to help honor that the best way you can and give them real choices, then they realize, oh, I do have some control. And hopefully it never escalates to the everyone losing their junk, them and you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what about you, Carrie? Do you have a different parenting style from your daughter-in-law? I know that Carly's baby's younger, but...
He is. Yes, Kayla and Taylor, they have 3, and she actually got an early childhood education degree from UGA. And so she's an amazing parent. And, when I was a parent, it was so non-traditional. I mean, I was married to Kurt for 7 years. And so we had those 7 years to parent together. But other than that, it was just me by myself. And so to see a mom and a dad together raising their kids, they are amazing. And I love that my kids are doing it better than I did. Different situation, different circumstances, obviously, but they are fabulous parents together, Taylor and Kayla. And then for Carly, again, to have Benjo there, like, wow, this is what it looks like to have 2 parents in the home. She's such a good mom. I see some of my tendencies in hers, like, a little bit of the non-emotional stuff in your own emotions, not saying what you need. I see that a little bit in her. But as far as like raising Roy, she's such a good mom, and has a good perspective on parenting. Just play more with him, be on the floor with him.
Yes.
Rather than staying busy. So I'm thankful that she saw that I did that and wants to do that with her own. So they're doing, I don't want to say better than I did, just different than I did.
Yeah.
And I like watching them. They're great.
Well, it is complicated when we talk about parenting styles, because I know as a young parent, and we've briefed on this before, my parents, I was real different than my parents, right? I would bring my kids, and I came with a list of do's and don'ts when I would drop my kids off. And I think my parents probably threw that list in the trash as soon as I walked out the door. And I would get fired up at them. Like, I would be like, seriously, Mom, you held the baby. We put the baby down and let the baby self-soothe. What are you talking about? I've worked so hard for them to teach themselves to fall asleep. Or what do you mean, as we've said before, you fed them sugar? Or what do you mean you didn't put my 4-year-old in a car seat? Oh, I mean, all these things. I would just lose it on my parents. My expectations of my parents was so high that they would basically be me when I was not there. Did you ever have that? I know you guys weren't close in proximity to in-laws and parents, so you might not have left your kids a lot with them like I did. No, you're both shaking your head. No. Yeah.
Well, with Kurt's parents, there was just like, yeah, whatever. I know what you're going to do. I'm just going to have to deal with it. They were sick every time. They'd like throw up when they get home from eating all the stuff. I wish I would have set some boundaries, but then again, that was less stress, just to let her love on them the way she loved on them, and deal with the consequences. So,
well, and see, I wish I would have been more like you. I wish I would have just said it didn't matter. My parents are now dead, and I wish I wouldn't have been such a booty to them and said all the things. Who cares? So for the short term, I mean, there's a balance, right? There's got to be somewhere in between, not who cares. I'm sure some people are listening to this going, I care, dadgummit. I don't want my in-laws doing this stuff. So there's got to be a balance. So how do we have the balance of different parenting styles? If you do have an issue with, maybe you see that something is going on and you're the grandparent, is it your place to bring it up? Parenting differences, you disagree with the way something's going on? Or is it your place to zip it and recognize that that's not your child? One of you?
I think it comes back to what we've said before, is saying, hey, I'm seeing something. Are you open to hearing, open to hearing about it? And they're saying yes or no.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's if they invite us into that space. That would be the ultimate, is for them to ask us. But other than that, I don't think we get to say anything.
So what do you think about this? I don't know if it's a trend, but definitely happened in my world. We had some friends that were required to take a class before they were allowed to babysit their grandchild. They were asked to take a grandparenting class to catch up on how to parent a child. What's your thought on that? Either one of you been asked to take a parenting class before you watch your grandbaby?
I mean, honestly, it would feel a little bit like a slap in the face, right? I mean,
yeah,
clearly I didn't do too bad, because, I mean, you picked him. Although I see all the memes, we're talking about memes about how, like, listen, you think you're such a great parent? I've seen your work. I'm married to it. It's not so great, right? But you chose that. So let's talk about that. I would probably want to have I would go do it, of course, because I would want to see the grandbaby. And if that helps the parents, the mom, feel better about, maybe that's her way of saying, hey, these are some things that I want to do, and I don't really know how to tell you that I want to do them. So I kind of want you to go to this class so you can see how we're doing it.
But where does that end, Alicia? Because I know with COVID, I had plenty of friends who were required to get vaccinated, and I don't need to know your view on vaccination, pro or against, but I did have friends who were required to get vaccinated to be around their grandbaby. So again, boundaries? I don't know. I just think it gets complicated.
It's complicated.
Right. It's complicated because what do you do?
Were there, if you are against vaccination, was that child's immunocompromised? Was there a reason that, there's all sorts of different areas of gray, I feel like.
Sure.
In there.
Hey, and maybe that's the answer. Maybe this is gray area and maybe there is something medically. I can understand if there's a medically fragile child saying, hey, can you take a CPR class so that you can make sure you're current on what's going on right now in CPR in case something happens. Listen, if any of my kids ask me to take a CPR class in case, sure. In fact, probably should do it anyway. Yeah, be up on it. That kind of stuff I'm willing to do. I just, for me, I don't know if I would be willing to go take a grandparenting class. I don't know that I'd be willing to do that.
The question would be, why not?
Oh.
So, yeah, that's a good question. Because, like you said, Kathy, if it's about, CPR training, yes, I'm all for it. Because even taking care of Roy, as much as I was, and being little, like, I've forgotten. How do you swaddle? I don't know. I have to look it up on YouTube. Like, I forgot some things. And so maybe being open to the idea that it's been a while. It's been a hot minute since I've taken care of a little one. And maybe could use a refresher.
Golly, that's a good point. Maybe I would do it, Carrie. Maybe it's good. Maybe there is no why not.
Things
maybe it's
have
just
changed.
Maybe it's just pride that I, freaking think I know it all. No, I don't know it all. I don't know.
We're all still learning.
We are all still learning. That's true. I just think it is interesting. So what about? I know we've touched on a lot of these things before on this subject, but what if they come to you? So you are going to get to watch your grandchildren. They do have special dietary restrictions or they don't. Which way do you land on that? Do you say, absolutely, I'm taking your list and I will follow it to a T? Or do you say, no way, Jose, I'm doing my own thing? Follow it.
Yeah. Carly, she's told me a few times, like, hey, I'm not, because I had some of those squeeze pouches for here. Even they're organic, it's all the things. She's like, Mom, I'm not giving Roy those right now. Just don't give it that. And then I'm like, okay. It's easier for me. But if that's something she's asking me to do is to not give him those, then that's what I'm going to do.
Ooh, I'm so curious. Why is she not giving those? Because I don't think they're great for kids either, but I'd love to know why she's not doing it.
She makes all his own food and always has. Just fresh sweet potatoes, avocado, like whole. She's not sure about what's in those yet. And also realizes once you realize the convenience of it, it's hard to go back.
Yeah.
And once she starts giving him those, it's hard to go back. Yeah.
Mine is more of a sensory. Our little kids are not getting the sensory experiences they used to get because we have so many of the pouches where it's just a squeeze situation. When you think about first giving a toddler or older infant the food and their hands are all in it and they're trying to move it to their mouth, that is such a fine motor skill. That is such a sensory input for them, a great sensory input for the brain. And we're seeing some more sensory issues develop in children today. And I think a lot of it stems from we're not exposing them to sensory input in the same way that we used to expose them to. So anyway, I was wondering, I was like, oh, go, Carly, go. So anyway, it doesn't matter the reason, right? It really doesn't matter the reason. If they ask us to do something, and here I just said I wouldn't take the class. I said I would take the class, children. I changed my mind. I'll take the dang class. But if my kids give me a list, and they say, hey, here's the rules, I'm all in. I'm all in to try and do it the best I can. Now, again, hopefully they realize that we do things a bit differently, just naturally. So it is hard when we come from, especially for me, if I come from a bit of a different parenting style than maybe my daughter-in-law, I don't know. It's complicated.
Yeah. Let me go back to the food situation again. Like when we see where this can lead, Like, okay, if they're going to eat all these things, this is what's gonna,
Yeah.
and that's hard. That's hard just to be
It's
like,
the opposite. I mean, it's not always they're the one bringing the organic stuff. We're the ones that are dye-free and stuff, and they're bringing the Fruit Loops with the Kellogg's 55,000 dyes in it. You're like, ooh. Now, listen, I will say, let's just talk about that particular thing. If I see a grandchild of mine who is sensitive to dyes, and this is because I had children who are sensitive to dyes, I will keep them away from it at my house. Whether or not the daughter-in-law would ask me to, but if I just recognize that, I'm probably not going to give them the Fruit Loops. I might go buy the organic kind that doesn't have all the dyes in it, equivalent of Fruit Loops. But that's for my own sanity, because gracious, do dyes jank up a kid's, behavior. So, not to be disrespectful, but I wouldn't be doing it to be disrespectful if my daughter asked if she brought the box of Fruit Loops. I would just be doing it for my own sanity. I would just go buy an equivalent that didn't have the dyes in it.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway, anything else on this parenting styles, and it's complicated? What about discipline? How do you handle when a child misbehaves at your house, a grandchild? The parents are there. How do you handle that? But you see, you're the one. Well, let's use an example. We were at the birthday party of the twins last week, and one of the children kicked the fool out of Jeff. They're kickers and hitters. And how do you handle that? The parents are there. The child's kicking and hitting, but the parents aren't necessarily doing anything about it. What do you do?
I jump in. I don't know if I should jump in or not. No one has ever told me, hey, we've got this. We can handle it. And honestly, it's not even like I think about it. It's like if I see, so for example, we were at my granddaughter's soccer game. It was a while back ago, and her little brother Jack was there, and there was this older boy, and background story, he had been kind of mean to Jack. He told Jack that he sucked, and he was just being mean. This kid was like 8 or 9. I mean, anyway, Jack went and squared up, and we didn't know that whole backstory, right? But Jack's 4, went and like straight up kicked this kid like a couple times right in the knee. Right in the shin.
Yeah.
All I saw was that Jack was kicking him. So, like, I went over there and I'm like, oh, hey. Now, once his parents realized that there was something going on, my son got up and it's like, what's going on? And then, kind of took over. But like, if we're at family dinner and I see one of them doing something, also, I feel like it's always so chaotic when we're all together that everybody's kind of doing their own thing, right? Nobody's like watching kids to be like, okay,
right.
I want to make sure that everyone's behaving okay. And I think that's totally okay, right? Everybody should kind of be free to interact. So sometimes, they do stuff and I'll, grab one of them. I've been known to put those kids in timeout on the fireplace before. I've been known to come home with them from picking them up from daycare for family dinner, and they're crying in the car. And I'm like, these two both have timeout when we get inside. This one can go. And obviously, like that, parents weren't there for that. But I mean, I'm basically bringing them into where their parents are with a consequence.
And your kids are okay with that?
They are.
Okay. Yeah, I think it depends on the kids.
As far as I know, nobody's ever said don't do that.
Right.
But because if they did, you wouldn't.
Correct.
Do you, I know there are times where, this isn't my family, but I've seen other interactions between daughters-in-law or daughters and parents. And the daughter or daughter-in-law will walk over and say, I've got this, what you said. They'll go over and take over the situation. And so I wonder, like for me, I try not to do the correcting. If my adult children are there, I try to defer to them. It's hard, especially like in that hitting situation. Now, if it's a physical, someone's getting hurt, I will step in, but I do try to still defer and tell the parent. And that's hard for me because I really do want to handle it myself. But for me, I feel like it is best to defer to the parents. And I will say, sometimes I will say, do you want me to handle this? I witnessed this. Do you want me to handle it? Or do you want to handle it? And I will say almost always they say, I will handle it. So I get the feeling for my situation that they prefer to handle it and not me. And so I try to respect that. So I think that's just can get complicated too. What about you, Carrie? Do you have a
Well,
plan
my
or
grandkids
rule?
are still young, a little bit, but I feel like same with you. If there's a situation where we're all together, and Millie had a meltdown one day, and they do it, they just take care of it. So I
Mm-hmm.
defer to them. Now
Mm-hmm.
Kayla has said, I don't know if she still feels this way, but when they came here without them, she's like, "Hey, you have my permission to discipline my kids." So she told me
Mm-hmm.
that. I was like, okay. But I do, if they're around, even Carly and Benjo, and little sweet little Roy, he doesn't do anything wrong yet. But if there was a situation, just defer to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just let them take care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's right. And I think I definitely have witnessed out and about where grandparents step in and they do the heavy correcting. And I wonder how the parents feel about that, the parents of the children. And so maybe it's fine. I think, again, it's the theme. It's the theme of this whole series. You got to talk about it. I'm so sorry for my stuffers like Carrie and even myself. I can stuff it. I'm talking big and bad about that. But it's the hard thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. If you have a grandparent in your life and they're overcorrecting and you don't want them to step in, you're going to have to say, hey, if I'm present, I want to be the one to do this because I'm working on this consistency, and it would help me if you would just hold off or let me know what the situation is and let me handle it. And then if you're the grandparent, not to get all uppity about it, just respect that and say, you're right. They're your kids. Listen, there's some freedom in that. Let's be honest. There's some freedom in
Mm-hmm.
going, here you go. Here's your kid that just hit a friend, or here you go. Here's your kid
Yeah.
who's melting down. Don't be so offended. I mean, I'm like, here you go. So I think, again, it goes back to honest conversation. And it sounds like Alicia and your family, they're all okay with it. And it sounds like you have a good system. Don't mess it up if it works. But if there is some tension there, you've got to identify what it is and try to work on that, I think, is the key. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I also, I'm the grandma, so I don't really want to be in that position to
Right.
discipline. I would prefer to just be this fun person. And now that I'm thinking about it, most of the time when that happens, there's like a pretty big thing that has happened, or it's against
Sure.
one of my other grandkids, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, nope, I don't let them treat you that way, and I'm not going to let you treat them that way.
Sure.
It's kind of a protective thing. And there have been times that I've, my son's been right there, and I'm like, he's kind of watching. I'm like, do you want me to like, I can totally, he's like, I'm like, I can take care of that for you if you want. And he's like, yes,
Yeah.
please. You just get to that point. You're just like, oh my gosh, these kids, like, they're just wearing me out. But yeah, I think good communication is key with that.
Yes.
I think maybe where grandparents get into trouble, at least grandparents that I've talked to, is that they see these grandkids behaving in a way that they never would have let their kids behave.
Yeah.
Right? Whether their parenting style was right or wrong or whatever, but these grandkids they're just watching them, and they're like doing things that their kids would have been disciplined for. And maybe the parents are okay with that behavior, or maybe the parents don't know what to do, whatever the reason is. But the grandparents then feel like it's their duty to step in and take care of it because the parents aren't doing anything about it. I'm sure we've all been in a restaurant where we see that kid and we're like, okay, if that was my kid, we would have been, dad would have picked him up and said, time to go to the bathroom. Nobody wanted a bathroom trip at the restaurant, But I think that's kind of where the grandparents you kind of get in trouble. And so, like, I mean, what do? You just, unless you're invited in, there's not really a whole lot that I think you can do and still maintain the relationship. Because you're going to have more. I was going to say, you're going to have more of an impact on those parents with your relationship with them than you will disciplining those kids and chipping away the relationship.
Yeah. It's the key. I think what you said, Alicia, is the relationship is the key. And for me, again, probably because of my background, I do try to model it. Like, I do model redirection. I do model conscious parenting around around any young mom that I'm around. I try to model giving children choices and hope that some of that will impact them. And especially around my daughter-in-law, I try to model that behavior. I feel like that's more powerful than sometimes, well, just what we said, we modeled after our own parents to some degree. So I just try to continue that and model it for my daughter-in-law. Listen, I think there's no real answer for this one other than be willing to learn, talking to myself. Don't be afraid to learn, even at our age. We need it. I appreciate you pointing that out, Alicia. It's important, and be willing to talk about it. And if you are the younger mom who really doesn't know how to handle it, be willing to give grace on the other side too. We all need to be willing to give grace. None of us have this figured out. None of us are perfect parents. We all have messed up. And if you're the one thinking over there, you have it figured out, again, let me be the sore one to say you don't. And just know for the small deposit, maybe you just have a conversation, or maybe if there's a parenting book that you love, that you share it with the daughter-in-law or the mother-in-law or mother and say, hey, can we read this together? Maybe I want to learn about this. Would you be willing to learn about this? And that I would do in a second. I would gladly.
Yeah.
I love to read a book and hear someone's viewpoint on parenting and why they think that's helpful for kids. Again, our common ground is we love our family. We love our children. We as mom love our children who become adults and who become parents who love their children. So if we can focus on that, we're going to make a huge difference. Any closing thoughts, Alicia, that you have?
Just it's about the communication. Grace and empathy, right?
Yeah.
Don't allow what you want to happen be the wedge that goes between the relationship with your daughters-in-law, your mothers-in-law, right?
Yeah.
Especially for the mother-in-law. And
good stuff. And also to try not to make assumptions at people's intentions. Usually sometimes as mother-in-laws, and grandparents, we really want the best for our kids. We're not trying to wreck and have our own way. It's this balance of fine line of doing too much and not enough. It's constantly we walk that line. And so to give us the benefit of the doubt, but also us to give our daughter-in-laws the benefit of the doubt.
I'm going to end it there. That's what we all need to take away. Thanks, you guys. We will be back next week for more It's Complicated. Thanks for listening.